My daughter defended my ex's affair and chose to live with her and her boyfriend, so I cut her off financially. Now, she's begging for forgiveness. I'm 45, male, and I've lived in the same Midwestern town my entire life. For a long while, I thought I had a stable family, a wife, a daughter, and a modest home where we shared dinners and laughter. But all that changed 2 years ago when I uncovered my wife's affair with some guy she met at a workplace event. I remember the night I confronted her, her eyes cold, refusing to even apologize. My entire world cracked. We separated soon after. She insisted our daughter, who was 17 at the time, needed a stable environment and that she herself could provide that better. The divorce process dragged on for months, with lawyers volleying financial details back and forth. In the end, my wife took a chunk of my savings as part of the settlement. I walked away bitter but relieved, thinking at least I could have some peace. I truly believed our daughter would see how betrayal shatters trust. But to my shock, my daughter not only forgave my ex for cheating, she openly defended it. She argued that people fall out of love, that it wasn't really that big of a deal. I was stunned. While I never expected her to hate her mother, I also never imagined she'd trivialize the affair like that. Then, only a week after the divorce was finalized, my daughter announced she'd move in with her mother and her mother's new boyfriend in a flashy condo downtown. Apparently, he had money, enough to dazzle a teenager with the promise of shopping sprees and fancy dinners. I tried to reason with my daughter, telling her she could always stay with me if the situation got uncomfortable. She rolled her eyes and said, "Dad, you're overreacting. Mom and her boyfriend aren't doing anything wrong." I felt my stomach twist. The father in me wanted to scold her for ignoring the moral weight of an affair, but I also recognized that she was at a rebellious age, easily swayed by luxuries. Still, it felt like a betrayal. After everything, she was brushing aside my pain and endorsing her mother's new life. When she turned 18, she asked me to keep funding her college plans, daily expenses, and a list of wants that ranged from a fancy laptop to a designer handbag. My fatherly instinct was to help, but something in her tone, an almost dismissive expectation that I'd cough up money, stung. So I laid down a boundary. I'd pay for tuition, but only if she was living responsibly and not disrespecting me at every turn. Her face twisted in frustration, and she accused me of being controlling. She claimed I was punishing her for living with her mom. That confrontation opened my eyes fully. She wanted my money while simultaneously mocking my values and championing her mother's affair. A knot of anger and betrayal lodged in my chest. I'd already lost so much in the divorce. My sense of stability, half my savings, the trust one once had in my family's unity. Now my own daughter was brushing me aside like a cranky old man with outdated morals. My patience wore thin. A few months went by. True to her word, my daughter spent more and more time with her mother's boyfriend, flaunting their outings on social media. She'd post pictures at upscale restaurants, front row seats at concerts, stuff I never could have afforded on a single dad's budget. Then, I got wind that she was skipping college classes more often to party with that crowd. When I confronted her, she shrugged and said, "It's my life, Dad. Stop meddling." I felt torn. I wanted to be the supportive father. Yet it was clear she was spiraling into a life fueled by entitlement. My ex, for her part, showed no concern for my daughter's truancy or partying. That new boyfriend apparently egged her on, calling me uptight and encouraging my daughter to live a little. The audacity burned me. Eventually, her college sent me a notice about her poor attendance and subpar grades, suggesting a meeting. I tried to talk to my daughter about it, but she brushed me off. "None of your business," she snapped. I reminded her that I was paying for her tuition. Her eyes flashed with anger, and she said, "You owe me that much. Isn't that what a father's supposed to do?" That was the straw that broke me. I'd spent 18 years raising her, yet she spoke as though I was just a walking wallet, obligated to fund her life choices without question. I debated how to handle it. Part of me still wanted to pay, hoping she'd come to her senses. Another part insisted enough was enough, that by enabling her lifestyle, I was fueling her disrespect. I confided in a close friend who advised me, sometimes tough love is the only way to reach them. Those words echoed in my mind. When the next tuition deadline came, I decided to stand firm. I told my daughter I wouldn't be paying another cent unless she turned things around. No more skipping classes, no more partying at the expense of her education. She erupted, accusing me of controlling her again. She stormed out, ranting about how I was punishing her for liking her mother's boyfriend. My ex-wife then blasted me with texts, calling me petty and threatening legal action. But there was no legal ground. Our daughter was an adult now, and she had to accept some responsibility for her decisions. That's when the real entitlement reared its head. My daughter posted online about how I was a toxic father, bragging that her mother's boyfriend would pay for her if I didn't. She wrote scathing remarks about me being bitter over a divorce I couldn't handle. Friends of hers chimed in, fueling the drama with comments like, "You deserve better." I felt humiliated. This was my own child, publicly trashing me for not funding her lifestyle. But I stayed quiet, refusing to engage in an online war. My ex's boyfriend was behind much of the chaos, stoking the flames. He'd snidely message me, claiming I was failing as a father. Once he bragged, "No wonder your wife left you. You can't even provide for your daughter." Every word felt like a knife. Still, I refused to budge. I'd spent enough years being taken advantage of. This time, I was standing my ground, no matter how painful. A few weeks later, cracks began showing in my daughter's fairy tale. Apparently, her mother's boyfriend was generous only when it suited him. My daughter discovered he had no intention of actually paying her tuition or supporting her everyday bills. Sure, he'd buy her a fancy dress for a night out or pay for an expensive dinner, but when the real costs rolled in, like rent, groceries, textbooks, he'd shrug and say, "Ask your father." My daughter tried to hide this from me at first, but word trickled back via mutual acquaintances. As her second semester approached, the college threatened suspension for unpaid fees. She called me in a panic. "Dad, you have to cover me, or I'll lose my spot." Her tone was desperation mixed with expectation, as though she assumed a phone call would melt my resolve. I remained calm, asking how she planned to fix her attendance record and failing grades. She scoffed. "I'll do better, I promise. Just pay it now." I didn't yield. I told her she needed to show tangible proof of improvement, attend all her classes, speak with her advisors, and possibly get a part-time job. She hung up on me, furious. Within hours, my ex-wife texted, accusing me of ruining our daughter's future out of revenge. She threatened to call lawyers again, though there was no legal ground to force an adult's father to pay for college. The next day, the boyfriend joined in, mocking me through social media posts. Guess some dads can't handle their obligations. It was infuriating, but I stuck to my line. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about boundaries. Another month passed, and I learned my daughter had indeed been suspended due to non-payment. She moved in full-time with her mother and the boyfriend. My ex tried to spin it. "She's better off here anyway. We could find her a new path." But I saw my daughter's social media posts. They showed frustration, late-night partying, and not much else. It seemed her life was unraveling. Then, out of nowhere, she showed up at my doorstep one afternoon, trembling on my porch. I answered, heart racing. She looked tired, her eyes puffy from crying. Without a word, she hugged me. Confusion and hope swirled inside me. I invited her in, and she broke down, spilling all the details. How the boyfriend had become increasingly controlling, how her mother sided with him on everything, and how they both blamed her for any inconvenience. The freedom and glamour she enjoyed at first had morphed into a stifling arrangement where the boyfriend would only pay for what he chose. She said, tears rolling, "I miss just being able to talk to you without screaming matches." It hurt to see my daughter in such a state. I sat her down, made some tea, and let her vent. After she composed herself, she asked if I'd be willing to cover her college fees again, or at least help her re-enroll. My heart ached to say yes, but I remembered the months of disrespect and how I'd let her words and actions slide. So, I replied carefully, "I'm willing to help if you genuinely show you've changed. I need you to meet me halfway." She nodded vigorously, promising to do whatever it took. Part of me wanted to trust her completely. Another part feared this was just a ploy. I laid out conditions. she'd have to move back in with me, or at least away from that toxic environment. Enroll in counseling to mend our strained relationship and prove consistency in her academics. She agreed, though I sensed she wasn't thrilled about leaving her mother's side entirely. Still, that was the line in the sand. I wouldn't pay another dime if she continued living under the boyfriend's roof, endorsing the affair that broke our family. She left that evening, saying she needed time to finalize her plans. I half expected her to revert to old habits, posting snarky jabs or letting her mother fill her head with more nonsense. But to my surprise, she stopped by a few days later with a small suitcase. Her mother and the boyfriend, upon hearing she was moving out, apparently exploded at her, calling her ungrateful. She told me she'd never seen her mother so furious. I tried to remain neutral, but inside, I felt a grim sense of vindication. They'd lost their control over her, and it clearly pissed them off. As the weeks went by, my daughter started therapy sessions. She talked about feeling caught in the middle of the divorce, about being lured by the boyfriend's flashy lifestyle, and how she dismissed my feelings in favor of the easy thrill. We had long, difficult conversations at the kitchen table about trust, disappointment, and the future. I saw glimmers of the daughter I raised, empathetic, determined, but misguided by the toxic influences of her mother's new partner. Her mother, meanwhile, seethed in the background. She'd send my daughter guilt-trip texts. "You're betraying me by living with your father." Or, "After all I did for you, you run back to him?" The boyfriend occasionally hopped on her phone, hurling insults at me or at my daughter. But she stood firm, ignoring them for the most part. I made it clear to her, if at any point you want to reconcile with them, that's your choice. But I won't pay for anything if you return to that environment. She understood, and for once, she didn't accuse me of being controlling. She saw the distinction. I was protecting my boundaries, not punishing her out of spite. We re-enrolled her in a nearby community college. She took a part-time job at a local bookstore to contribute to her own expenses, a symbolic step showing she wasn't just expecting me to foot every bill. In her second month back home, she finally apologized face-to-face. "Dad, I'm really sorry for defending that affair. I realize how painful it must have been for you." Hearing her take responsibility for siding against me was a weight off my shoulders. I told her, "I accept your apology. Let's move forward together." Her mother's attempts to sabotage our progress didn't stop. She'd threatened to take me to court for something or other, but my lawyer assured me we were fine. My daughter was 18, so custody wasn't an issue. The boyfriend's influence waned. He'd occasionally post cryptic statuses online, accusing me of stealing my daughter back, but nobody took it seriously. In time, my daughter and I found a new rhythm, one built on honesty and mutual respect. She started performing better in her classes, and though it wasn't immediate, our home life stabilized. She told me one night, tears in her eyes, that she understood now how an affair can fracture a family. "He's a manipulator," she said of her mother's boyfriend. And I didn't see it because I was blinded by all the fancy stuff. I didn't lecture her further. I'd promised myself to remain supportive. People can make mistakes, especially young adults struggling with family upheaval. The key was seeing genuine remorse and a willingness to improve, both of which she showed. In the end, cutting my daughter off financially was the wake-up call she needed. It forced her to realize respect isn't a one-way street, and that I wasn't an endless ATM to be exploited while she defended the very betrayal that nearly broke me. The mother and her boyfriend faced the full consequence of their entitlement. They lost the ability to control my daughter's future. Meanwhile, I found closure, seeing my daughter come back to me with humility and a renewed bond. Now we're taking it one day at a time. She's not perfect, and neither am I. But we're communicating openly